so much for joining us for today's episode of Inside Austin's Agenda. I'm your host, Grace Reeder, and I am joined today by digital data reporter Christopher Adams for KXAN. Christopher, first I want to bring you in to talk a little bit about, that is kind of a mouthful of a title we were talking about before.
Yes.
Talk about what it is that you do for us here at KXAN.
Yeah, so I'm a reporter for our digital team, so all the stories that I do are more focused toward being on our website rather than what you would see on a TV newscast. And I'm a data reporter, so all of my stories have some sort of data element. Basically, it means I'm a nerd. I've got Microsoft Excel open all day long. I make a lot of maps and charts and visualizations to bring stories to life and give a little bit extra context into the stories that we're covering from day to day.
And just so people know, this is not like typically something, not a lot of stations have this. This is a really unique position that KXAN has and that adds a lot of context and depth to the stories that we do. So we love having you here. Thank you for coming on to talk about elections. First, starting with the voting guide that you put together for has a whole long list of everything that people need to know as they head to the polls. So if we can put that up, if you've got it for us, we're going to walk through that for people. You can find this over at KXAN.com. So walk me through what people are going to find when they go to our voter guide over on KXAN.com.
Yeah, so this is ideally supposed to be kind of your go-to place to find everything you need to know before you head to vote. Obviously, Election Day is on Tuesday, so you can see there we've got a countdown until when polls close on Tuesday evening. So you've still got technically 6 days to vote. After today, there are only 3 voting days remaining, Thursday, Friday, and then, of course, Election Day itself on Tuesday. But what we're looking at here is kind of a list of what are you actually going to see on your ballot. So obviously, we've got the big presidential race. Everyone knows about that. But there are a lot of other things, more local races on your ballot that you may not necessarily know about until you get to the voting booth. So we've got a list of those here to help you see what exactly is on your ballot so you can start potentially researching those candidates, researching those propositions, and cast an informed vote. And those range from everything from city council and mayor, obviously Austin's got a big mayoral race this time, all the way down to things like school board trustees and propositions for different school districts as well. So what you're looking at right there is actually from our partners at NBC News, and this is kind of like a little area where you can go and really plan your vote. So they've got information there by how to cast a ballot by mail, early voting versus election day voting, any changes to the rules compared to the last election we had, all that kind of thing. Below that, we've got a list of every single county in our viewing area. We cover 15 counties here across Central Texas, and this is where you can go to find your own sample ballot. So you click on whichever county you're in, and you can find either your precinct or a countywide ballot to see what races will you actually be voting for. So again, that's a place you can go to make that list, and then you can start researching what races and what people you will be deciding between. We've got a little calendar section there. It's obviously a lot of these dates have already passed. Things like the voting registration deadline, obviously that's passed. There are 18.6 million people registered to vote here in Texas. The last day to apply by mail has already passed as well. So really the only 2 dates that we're looking at now are when early voting ends, which is again this Friday, and Election Day itself coming up next Tuesday. If we scroll down a little bit, you can see here, we've got a couple maps showing, this is specific to Travis County, the early voting locations, and then another map below that shows the voting locations on Election Day, when there are several more sites that you can vote compared to early voting. Again, this is just for Travis County, but we do have a link to all of the counties on this voter guide where you can go and see your specific county if you don't live in Travis County. And then some of the most important things are these next 2 sections. What do you have to bring, and what are you not allowed to bring? Mm-hmm. So obviously, as you know, Grace, Texas is a voter ID state, so you do need a photo ID in order to vote. Most commonly, that's going to be a Texas driver's license, but there are several other photo IDs that are eligible, things like a passport or a DPS identification card. But also, what are you not allowed to bring? Obviously, there's some things in there that might be somewhat obvious to you, but other things might not necessarily be obvious. You're technically not allowed to have your cell phone out while you're in the voting location. You're not allowed to take any photos, any video, things like that. So if you want to have a list of who you're going to vote for, it's better to do that on a piece of paper rather than pulling out your cell phone in a note. The other thing that, Grace, I know you've covered a lot is clothing, hats, flags, things like that. You're not allowed to support a particular candidate. That's what we call electioneering, and that's actually illegal here in Texas within 100 feet of the polling location. I know you did a days ago about that. And then at the bottom, we've got a little section where if you have submitted a mail-in ballot, if you've sent your ballot in through the mail, you can click on that link to find out if it's been accepted by your county and if it's been counted. And then there's that list of all the local county officials, the local county offices that I mentioned, where you can go and see specific wait times in each county. Again, they've got sample ballots on there, lots of information depending on which county you live in.
So this is really like an all-encompassing, any information that you need to know. I love this because it's a one-stop shop, and I've been using it because we have been getting the reports. We've been seeing them. We are getting questions from people who are going to vote, and they're saying, especially you mentioned electioneering, we've seen a lot of questions about that. Are people allowed to stand out here with their Trump or their Harris signs? We've gotten a lot of questions about that. And so it's nice to be able to send them that link and say, here's all the information that you need. But I want folks to know that we've also been getting those questions, seeing them. And when we're seeing a lot of those questions, we're doing specific stories to answer those questions for you. Electioneering, as you mentioned, was one that we did do. We did a Q&A on what are you allowed to do? What are you not allowed to do? That's over at KXAN.com for you. I did that story last week. And we want you to keep sending those questions. Me and Christopher and all of the rest of our team have been sending questions to the League of Women Voters Austin, to Travis County, Williamson County, Hayes County, all of those clerks and those officials to get answers for you. We will continue to do that. One of the fun things that we did also was we chatted with the League of Women Voters last week about some of the most popular questions that they were getting, and they matched up with some of what we were getting, and we put that together in a story, and so let's play that right now because I think that might answer some of our viewers' questions as well. You may know the League of Women Voters as the group that puts these out, the trusty voter guides. But with early voting upon us, they're also busy fielding election questions.
We have volunteers who answer the phones, and it's primarily when we get phone calls, they're either very, very complicated and so ungoogleable, or they're pretty simple, like how do I find where my polling place is?
We asked them Tuesday for some FAQs, hoping to streamline some of that info to you. A lot of those questions surrounded voter ID, like what if I moved and my address doesn't match my license?
Some of the forms of ID don't even have an address on them, like a passport. So as long as it is a picture of you on there and it has your name, and it's one of the 7 forms of ID that are approved, it's fine. It can also be expired up to 4 years. So if it expired like on your last birthday, you're fine. You can still use that to vote.
And if you move to Texas and haven't been able to get an appointment for an ID just yet,
what you can do is take some other form of ID, which there's a fairly long list. It can be a certified birth certificate. It can be your driver's license from a different state. But then you just have to sign a reasonable impediment declaration, which says essentially, I tried to get a driver's license and I couldn't get one in time.
The League of Women Voters Austin area says they've also had quite a few questions about what's allowed at a polling place, all the way down to if available parking spots are within that 100-foot barrier from a polling location's door, and my car has candidate bumper stickers or flags on it, can I park there?
The answer is no. They have to park that car outside the 100-foot barrier.
Obviously, there's a lot to the law here, and if you feel it's not being followed, there are resources for that.
Well, if you have something that's actually genuinely a problem, you can call 866-OUR-VOTE, which is that's nationwide, and that is the nonpartisan election protection hotline. I like to joke that there are lawyers on the other end who will yell at people for you. But actually, really, it's just people who really know what they're talking about who can answer those kinds of questions.
Grace Reader, KXAN News. Christopher, the other big story that we always follow during early voting is the numbers, and you have been tracking that as well. Talk to me a little bit about where you get that data and where those numbers come from.
Yeah, so each day we get new data from the Texas Secretary of State's office for every single county in Texas, all 254 counties. So we can see exactly how many people have voted in each county, and then of course statewide as well. So what we're looking at here is the list of counties in our KXAN viewing area. We've got 15 counties that we cover here, and we can see what % of registered voters have already cast their ballot in each of those counties. I want to give a huge shout out to the Hill Country because Blanco, Llano, and Mason County are, as you can see, they're leading the way locally, but also leading the way statewide. They are the top 3 counties in all of Texas right now when it comes to the percent of registered voters that have already cast a ballot, all of them hovering right around 54%. That compares to about 37% on a statewide level. And you can see even locally there are some kind of big swings between where the turnout is highest and where the turnout is lowest. Caldwell County, for example, is the lowest locally at about 36%. Even Travis has not yet reached 40%. So again, we've still got a long way to go. The last couple of days of early voting are typically the busiest days, especially Friday. And then Election Day itself is the busiest day. But still, you can see there are some pretty good, healthy turnout numbers that we're already seeing locally. If we scroll up on this story, we can compare that to what we're seeing statewide. And Esme, I'm going to have you go all the way up to the top of the story and go back down to the first chart. And so what we're looking at here is the cumulative turnout in all of Texas. So I mentioned a little bit earlier, we've got 18.6 million Texans registered to vote in this election. As of yesterday, almost 7 million turnout statewide currently. In 2020, at the end of the election, almost 67%, 2/3 of people cast a ballot. That was really high compared to previous elections. You can see there from 2000 all the way to 2016, it was only in the mid to upper 50s turnout-wise. So again, we're about 37%, and we've got several more days, 3 more full days of voting to go, so we can expect that number to rise. If we go down to the next chart, this is the really interesting one that I think. This is comparing turnout this year to turnout in 2020. And I want to give a huge caveat here, Grace, because obviously what was happening in 2020?
COVID.
Exactly. Right. So what happened that year was there was an extra week of early voting. So that gray bar that you see at the front end of that chart, during that first week in 2020, more than 4 million Texans cast a ballot. Now this year, we've obviously only got the 2 weeks, so turnout is obviously lagging behind last year, but you can see that upward trajectory, the angle of the line, the purple line for this year is much greater, and so it looks like we are likely to overtake the early voting totals potentially that we saw in 2020, and certainly I do think we are going to overtake the overall turnout by the end of Election Day.
Very interesting. Well, let's look forward to Election Day then, but actually first I want you to reiterate for folks if they want to vote early, when they need to go, there are expanded hours, and where they can get that information.
Yes, absolutely. So early voting does end this Friday. Typically in most counties, early voting ends at 7 p.m. Today, Thursday, and Friday, and even on Election Day as well. But here in Travis County, there are, I believe it's 8 locations that have extended hours that Grace was alluding to. So 8 of those polling locations will be open until 10 p.m. Those are typically the ones that have a ton of voters, really high turnout in those locations. I know the Ben-Hur Shrine is one of those, for an example, that always has really, really high turnout. So in those 8 locations, those voting hours are extended until 10. And again, you can find that information on our KXAN voter guide on KXANcom.
Which is why we put it all in one spot for you. So now let's talk about election night. You have been busy putting together all kinds of data points, which we will get to and very excited about. But first, let's put up all of the races that we're going to be covering as a KXAN crew. We have all kinds of people who are going to be all over the state covering these races for you. We've got everything from the presidential race, which of course we've got NBC working on for you. We have KXAN crews working on the Texas Senate race. I will be working the Austin mayoral race along with the Austin City Council race alongside Brianna Hollis. We've got folks working the Travis County District Attorney race. We've got propositions here and in our surrounding counties that will impact you and that are taxpayer dollars. So we've got a whole lot that you can see right there, and we have reporters that are going to be on all of these things. We have been prepping for this for weeks. We're going to have folks stationed all over the state. We're going to be bringing you live coverage here on KXAN Live and also over on broadcast. Our KXAN Live coverage, by the way, starts at 7 o'clock. We're going to have reporters here on KXAN Live. We will also be over on the broadcast version, so you can catch it whichever way is most convenient for you. So, Christopher, talk a little bit about on the data side, what this is going to look like, what goes into what people are going to find on our website.
Yeah, so obviously KXANcom is your local election headquarters. We want to be the place where you go to find all of these local election results. So we're going to have all of those on there for you. We've got interactive maps showing how every county in Texas votes on the presidential race, on the Senate race. Obviously, we're going to have the nationwide coverage as well in terms of who is winning the presidential race, who's winning the balance of power in the Senate and the House. But again, we're your local election headquarters, and we stress the local because we've got so many important local races that really are just as important in terms of affecting your day-to-day life as the presidential race is. Things like who is running your mayor on city council, who's running your city on city council, who is the mayor of your city, which people are representing your school on the board of trustees, everything like that. So again, we've got all of the results coverage on KXAN.com. We've got, I think it's 126 local races that we're tracking. So we had that list there. Those are the ones that we've got reporters assigned to, but there are so many more that we're monitoring. We're going to have all of that results coverage online for you on election night. How
does that work on the back end? How are we pulling in all of that data for 126 races?
Yeah, so it's a lot of work. I'm part of the results team here at KXAN. Each of those 126 races, we are actually going to be projecting a winner on election night, hopefully, if things work out as planned. But for the past several weeks, we've been getting things ready. We are pulling in data like Grace mentioned. We've got the early voting data that comes into us every single day from all of the counties via the Secretary of State's office, so we know how many people are voting. Election day itself, we'll be reaching out to all of our local counties to see what is turnout looking like, how does it compare to previous years. We've got all of those numbers kind of built in already so we can see what turnout is looking like. And then when it comes to projecting the races, it really just comes down to the math. So when you see, NBC News or one of the big national outlets projecting a race, they have access to a ton of data, exit polling data, things like that unfortunately we don't have access to. We don't have the capability, unfortunately, to stand outside several different polling locations and ask people how they just voted. So when it comes to making projections for us, we have to rely on the math. So we look at how many votes have been counted so far, how many votes do we estimate are still remaining to be counted, what is the margin currently between the first place candidate and the second place candidate, and are there enough votes outstanding for that second place to take the lead and, be the winner in that race.
So when we call it, it's a done deal. It's the math, it's done.
Yes. So because of that, you might see some races may look like, oh, he's probably going to win or she's probably going to win, but we're not exactly sure because something crazy could happen on election day. Every single person that votes could vote for candidate A on election day, but every person in early voting voted for candidate B. It's not going to happen, but,
it could.
It could. You never know. So we have to wait until it's mathematically impossible for candidate B to catch up to candidate A before we make a projection.
I find that so interesting, and I love that you have done this. This is not your first election. This is not your first rodeo, but I always love hearing what goes into this, and then I walk into where you work on election day and see your spreadsheets, and then I'm like, never mind. I'm going to go out into the field. It's a lot of work. You've got a whole team with you, though. We've got interns in here who are helping you, who are calling offices. Yes. Shout out to the interns, and we're so thankful for them. They get pizza, but not a lot else. We appreciate their efforts. But Christopher, is there anything else that you want people to know heading into this big time for them?
No, just a reminder to pull up that KXAN voter guide on KXAN.com. Again, it's where you can find what's on your ballot, what you need to bring, what you're not allowed to bring, everything in one location to make it really easy for you.
And I do want to remind people that right here on KXAN Live, we will have coverage on election night starting at 7 p.m. You're going to find everything here that you're going to find over on KXAN. So do check out KXAN Live on election night. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Inside Austin's Agenda. A reminder that we air every other Wednesday. We'll catch you on the next time.